Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Boy, do I have a beautiful reel to work on today. This one was sent in to me by Kevin. He sent me a couple of reels. They appear to never have been used. Just some light scratch marks on the case, maybe a little bump and grind over here kind of thing. But overall, the paint on this one is beautiful. And what is it? Well, it's the Shakespeare Sea Wonder 2081-A. This is a beautiful reel made in the USA. We're going to show you how to take this reel apart, how to service it, how to get it ready to go fishing, giving it a second chance. Well, it's a big reel. It's ideal for surf and fishing from a boat or shore or pier for that matter, drop fishing or retrieving lures. And this one is probably one of the best made reels of the time. Sometimes this series is called the Royal Maroon because of its paint color, and well, you'll see why it becomes a fan favorite and why it lasts the way it does as we take this apart. While we're doing that, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you like the art of reel repair, if you like to learn about fishing reels, current and classics, and if you want to see how to maintain them. Well, this is the channel for you. And the subscription with the notification is the best way for you to keep advised of what it is that I'm doing, what I'm working on, and well, you can see where your interests lie. And if you like, you can make sure to catch up with them so that you can learn and maybe even get an assist in working on a reel. Well, we've taken off the spool by removing the adjuster knob. We've taken off the handle by turning that in the opposite of the crank direction. In this case, that would be clockwise. And now we're going to remove the side plate, which has the 3 screws that are holding it in place. Make sure when you do this that you match the size of the slot of the screw to the screwdriver that you're using. Don't go too small with a screwdriver. You can butterfly the side plates, and if you do that, well, those screws will be more difficult to get out the next time, or maybe impossible. So there's 3 screws that are holding this on, and if you haven't worked on a reel like this in the past, make sure you take pictures as you do the disassembly. A lot of these reels are older reels. They're difficult to find schematics on. They're difficult to find information on, and well, you could be at a loss if you don't take the pictures on orientation. Here's your inside the reel. This is one of the reasons why it's considered a classic and a very nice reel. It has a spiral drive on it. It's not the traditional rounded main gear with a stud on it that's driving an oscillation block. I just used a little bit of WD-40 or a penetrating oil to clean up the hard grease. Now we're going to remove the pin that holds the crosswind arm to the axle shaft. The crosswind arm is offset on the main gear, and that's why the axle shaft will go up and down when pinning the arm to that shaft. We should be able to just loosen that, and now we should be able to pull up and out on the axle shaft. This axle shaft seems to be aluminum. It's possible. I'm not sure, but it seems very lightweight as I pick it up. Make sure when you're cleaning a reel, old or new, to get all that old grease off. If you don't, it can carry contaminants, and those contaminants can injure the reel in the future. Well, we should be able to do 2 things here. We want to push this main gear out, but I want to set the anti-reverse dog to off before I do that. I don't want to trap that anti-reverse dog behind the main gear as I remove it. To remove the main gear, simply pull up and out. Right now there's a little bit of a stick there, probably just old greases and oils. And here's how your anti-reverse dog is set up for those of you that may have taken it off or may wonder about it. It's got a double dog, and when you push in, this little tag end here is going to intersect with the click ratchet on the back of the main gear. When you release it, it stops the intersection or the anti-reverse, and it releases it so that you can pedal the reel backwards. I'm using a cotton swab now to remove the old grease on that. We also have a little bit of old grease puddled up inside the main gear here, so we'll get rid of that. I like the cotton swab. It enables you to get into tight places, and it also holds it. Check the teeth on the main gear, make sure that they're all uniform and that they're not clogged with old grease. If they are, simply grab a hard brush. You can use a toothbrush or one of these kind of department store or hardware store kind of 3-packs of hard brushes, and clean that off. There's also a little bit of grease onto the face of the main gear here. Again, I'm going to use a penetrating oil and just wipe that down. Looks like that grease has actually tarnished the main gear. Just use, there you go. Yeah, so what I thought was grease is really just tarnished now. All right, that's your assembly. If you wanted to, you can take the crosswind arm off, but that's totally clean and you don't need to get underneath it. What you do want to do is make sure that you can put a little bit of oil there so that the swing works nice and easy. All right, that goes into my parts tray. And now we come up top here to remove the rotor. And again, this looks like this reel has had very light, if not any use at all. There's a tag on this one that holds that nut in place, so you want to bend that tab back. I'm using a screwdriver to do that. And pay attention to the orientation of the way that this tag goes, because when it's time to reinstall, you will need to do that. While the reel has been used, there's some broken line in there. You can see it on the tip of my finger. But again, this isn't a contest about whether it's been used or not. It's how to service the reel. One more effort here. I'm going to have to take this off to push down a little bit on that tab. Push it down and knot it away so I can get a ratchet on there. Notice how your spring goes for your bail trip lever. Some of you may be looking at that just because you've taken it apart and you're wondering how to reconnect it now. That's how to do that. And now I want to find the right ratchet wrench to remove that. I keep sockets nearby on my desk because, well, for this reason. This will just take a moment, but we will get the right one. This is kind of interesting. I have the metrics, but this reel was made in the U.S. probably before the metrics, but some of them do line up like this. And then once you have that deep socket, and you need the deep socket because an open-end wrench is not going to be able to get in there to do that. But once you open it up, you can remove it by hand. You know, this one seems like an aluminum nut as well. Not sure, but it seems that way. Note your orientation on the clip. Simply pull it up. The inner ring now, right here, holds a bearing, and it's a snap ring. You're going to notice that it has 2 spots or holes in that ring, and you need a snap ring pliers to remove that. The snap ring pliers has 2 points on it. You can fit those into the holes, pull across with that to tighten. And then pull that ring out. And be careful, it can shoot. It certainly shot on me on more than one occasion. And well, you don't want to go looking for it if you don't have to. When you remove the pinion gear or spiral drive, you can get to the dirt that you couldn't get to if you were simply trying to flush this reel with some degreasers or the like. I prefer to take the reel apart in all its pieces for the most part. There's no reason to touch your anti-reverse dog assembly there. There's no reason to remove a bail during a regular service unless it's not working. Then of course you want to do that. But for this purpose of a service, a little drop of oil in here was fine. As I mentioned, this is a bearing. Just make sure it's spinning nicely. Hard to see if this one is sealed or not. I'll float a little bit of oil on there. If it's sealed, if it's shielded, it'll just kind of seep in. Well, here's the one item that we did want to address. All of the old greases have dried on this spiral shaft. So the first thing I will do is take a paper towel to try and wipe off as much of that as I can. And then, as I showed you before with the main gear, you want to use a hard brush now to get into the channels to pull that old grease out. And I pull that onto a paper towel so that I don't transfer it onto my board and onto my next project. Well, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, maybe you're working on one and you're stuck, maybe you want to know a little bit more about the history of the reel, those kinds of things, please leave the questions in the comment section. I'll be happy to try and answer those for you. I do try to answer them in the morning. I'm not a 24/7 helpline here, but I will try to answer them and give you some guidance usually in the mornings. Alright, I'm going to use a fishing reel grease now. I'm using Penn Precision Reel Grease. I'm going to get the greases back where they belong, fresh and new without contaminants. We want to get it into the channels of the drive. We want to get it into the base, which is going to ride in the hole below it, and then a little bit where the inner race of that bearing is going to ride. Let's put the bearing back on. Now we can install the assembly into the case. Make sure that your bearing goes all the way down. And then on the snap ring, it's the reverse now. I like to find the back part of this, kind of hold that down in place. Again, this one has a propensity to shoot if you're not paying much attention. So kind of line it up. Take a deep breath, I guess, as you go to put it in. And then make sure it's in that slot. You just heard it click in there, and well, this is interesting. This whole drive can come down. Once you do that, now we can go put the rotor back on. Before I do that, I want to oil around the junction points. And again, you do not need to remove a bail assembly unless the bail isn't working. Makes sense, right? Let's go back in with this. Find your square sides. Line up the little tie lever collar. Let's get our axle shaft screw back on to hold the, I guess, rotor nut would be a good call for that. And then grab your wrench and your ratchet, reverse the throw, tighten that, and then give it a spin. Make sure it's doing what it should be doing. All right, nice and quiet. I'm pretty certain this reel has only had light use at best. All right, last thing I want to do then, I want to grab a pliers and bend that tab back up as we found it. All right, that's that section. Turn our attention to the main gear. This one was a little tight coming out, so there may be some dried grease on it. I'm just going to do a quick little buff of that with some steel wool. We'll apply some grease to the shaft. You don't need to grease the click ratchet. That's where the metal anti-reverse dog is going to go. It's not a drive. And then, like we did with the pinion gear, make sure that we get a nice amount of grease onto the main. Get it onto the teeth, and then get it on the face of the gear where that crosswind arm is going to slide. When we do that, we can put that back in. Again, your anti-reverse is in the off position. Move your ball a little bit if you're having an issue with its seating. Take your axle shaft and a very light coating of grease on the axle shaft. Bring that through. And then align the hole in the axle shaft with the hole in the crosswind arm. That's where the pin is going to go. Go to your parts tray and get the pin. And if you're having any trouble, if it doesn't go in easy like it just did here, then please stop. Take a look at what you're doing. Try to reset that. Because if you're trying to force anything on any of these reels, well, they weren't made to be forced in. Right. And as I say that, there's a screw here, or a roll pin that was made to be forced in. Give it a spin, and that's how your reel works. You can see how your arm travels up and down. As your arm travels up and down, the axle shaft travels up and down during the spooling. That's a nice piece there. We'll clean off the rest of this grease on the top of the axle shaft. And now we can take a look at the spool and make sure that the spool gets serviced. So the spool has a little C-ring in it, and it rides in a groove just like that snap ring did. This one does not have the rings on it. I think if I remember on these, they're a combination of washers. They're hard washers, but they are flexible. I'm going to put grease on these. I'm going to use a drag washer grease called Cal's Universal Drag Grease. You don't need to run out and buy it if you don't have it. What you would want to do is you would want to use fishing wheel grease as the substitute. I've got this backwards. This is I forgot the one on the bottom of the channel there. There's 3 drag washers. There's 3 metal washers. The drag washer goes first. There's 2 washers that have a rectangular center. Those are called keyed washers. They go top and bottom. This is the one I greased before. There's a washer that has 2 points on it. That's called the eared washer. That goes in the middle. And that goes in the slots in the case here. Last washer gets greased. They only grease permeable washers. Doesn't make sense to grease a plastic Teflon washer. It can't absorb the grease. And the purpose of that grease is to keep them flexible and not allow them to dry out and crack and become useless. Once you do that, the clip ring goes into the slot. You can mount the spool onto the shaft. Tighten down the spool. Well, there's only one thing left now. Take my glove off for this. That's to put the side plate back on. But again, here's your operation. You'll see how the spool goes up and down, how this just moves nice and easily throughout. 3 screws in my parts tray. Those are the only pieces left. Let's go ahead and put the case back together. I'm going to grab the one from the lower corner here. I'm actually going to use a little micro driver here to get it started. I'm going to be working on a reel that's kind of new old stock, beautiful finish. You certainly don't want to mess anything up. You don't want to put any gouges or anything in the paint. So just take your time, be careful. Patience works in reel repair. One more. And again, a big thank you to Kevin for sending this reel in. It's a beauty. It's all been cleaned up. You saw it had some dried grease inside. This one's ready to go fishing again. All right, give it a spin. Make sure it's doing what it's doing. Hey, no tick 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 noise. That's because we turned this off when we removed the main gear. Turn it back on. Works beautifully. Make sure your bail trips. Doing fine. That's it. That's how you service the Royal Maroon Shakespeare Sea Wonder reel, the 2081-A, made in the United States. Beautiful reel. And if you have the opportunity to get one, I would say go out and try to find one, because they're fun to fish with. They're a beautiful display of American, made in the USA workmanship, and a really nice reel to own. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for all it is that you do to keep us safe. Your efforts truly are appreciated. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. I wish you the best time on the water. Enjoy your fishing and enjoy the art of reel repair. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.